riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
Hey guys, Brad Chappell back at the Crappie Expo in Birmingham, Alabama. Sweet home, Alabama. Here we are, the Crappie Connection with you guys. I got two guys with me today, and I got a subject line that I love to go out there and do as much as possible. And I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about each one of them, and we'll kick off today's topic. Go ahead, Tim.
Tim Howell, I own Long Branch Guide Service over in Mississippi on the Big Four, Grenada, Enid, Sardis, and formerly Archer Butler.
R.I.P.
That's it.
I'm Jeff Jowers right here. I'm in Jemison, Alabama. I guide full-time on Coosa River chain.
Coosa River?
Yeah, Coosa River, any of them. Primarily on Lay, Mitchell, but we'll do any one of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, what I want to get both of these guys on here today and talk about is casting to open water crappie with LiveScope. You know, this is something that hadn't been around all that long. I know I haven't been doing it, a couple of years now, but I want to pick both of your brains, and I'm going to spill some of the ways that I go about it. But and I'll start with you, Tim. Kind of go through your basic setup, what you're using when you're going out casting to these open water fish.
I've kind of got two approaches. Of course, I'm predominantly a spider rigger, and that's how I guide most every day. But what I do is I use an 11-foot jigging rod while I'm guiding.
Yeah.
I cast out past the trolling rods a lot of times and catch a few fish that are out away from the boat. And the reason I use the 11-foot rod is because, I need to get past those 16-foot trolling rods, number one. And once you catch a fish, you got to get it back to the boat without getting everything tangled up. So I kind of adapted to using that long rod. And what I found out with the long rod is I can manipulate the jig so much better with that long rod. Just, I can stop the jig head just by raising the tip of the rod or getting it down a little faster, dropping it. It's worked very well for me. Took me a while to get that technique figured out with the trolling rods. It's a whole different ballgame when you got all that stuff out in front of you. But when we're out just chasing fish casting, I like a 7-foot ACC. Their new rod that they just come out with is awesome for this technique.
What about jig heads? What are you using size-wise? Are you changing it up? Or?
I do. It just depends on the depth of water I'm in for the most part,
Right.
is what I do. Over where I fish, 15-foot or deeper, I'm probably going to have a 1/4 ounce head tied on.
Right.
Just so, so that the jig falls fast and it gets down to the fish, before it gets out of my range, so to say.
Yeah, these fish are moving a lot of times.
Yeah, they are moving. And I've actually went to a 1/4 ounce head with a number 6 hook. Mm-hmm. Small hook with a big head. That way I can downsize the bait and still have the heavy weight. Seems to work really well for me.
It's, that's the thing about LiveScope, and I think even Tim and I talked about it yesterday a little bit, but it's so many different self-preferences. It's kind of like if you get in my pickup and start driving it, you're going to adjust my seat. You're going to adjust that rearview mirror. Mm-hmm. It's all about these personal preferences, and that's why we got 3 different guys here, myself included with that we're going to all have a little bit different when it comes to this technique. It's not just a set in stone. You've got to use 11-foot or a 7-foot or a 5-foot. But Jeff, kind of tell us your preferences and then kind of how you go about this kind of deal.
Well, I tell you, I go about it. I'm kind of like Tim. I have a couple of different ways. Now, I'm no spider rigger. I've got a bass fishing background, so I'm normally my foot's on the gas. I'm standing up when I don't have clients now.
Right.
As far as rods go, I'm normally throwing the that ACC one-piece 6.6, and then I also love their 8-footer. There's times where I'm gonna cast to normally on my when you say personal preferences. When it comes to Garmin, that's when I'm running. I'm running Garmin LiveScope, and if I'm fishing and targeting fish in open water, no structure involved, I like to go to that blue palette, that blue screen, what I call low rance blue. That way, I can determine. I can pretty much tell you what that fish just about weighs on that, and it just my jig shows up better. I can tell you what fish we want to throw at, which one we don't want to throw at. Now, when it goes to fishing on structure, casting to them, they're on standing timber, then I'm gonna go to your amber. It's got a better separation definition when it comes to that color palette. Jig weight, that depends on their depth, and a lot of times I'm gonna have a 1/16 to an 1/8 here at home. At Grenada, I'm going to an 8 to a 3/16.
Right.
Because and the reason for that 3/16, I can get down to her quick, fast, in a hurry. Because a lot of times you got a little bit of wind, you got boat slap or something like that. You got a one-shot deal on her.
That's right.
So I need to get it out, down past her, and bring it to her and get it in front of her quick. I don't want to screw it up on a big one.
You know me, I go through my typical setup. I'm day in and day out. I like a 7.5 foot. It's a B&M casting the 75th series combo. You can purchase it, throw it in your boat, and go with it. It's got enough length for me that you can control these fish, and I want to kind of give some of these guys that are watching and listening some tips on how to actually control these jigs coming in. And I've seen it a lot, and that's why it's kind of on top of my head even about this technique and how to do it properly, because it might sound like you're just casting out there and chunking and winding it in.
No, it's all about presentation.
It's all about presentation, and I tell people all the time, strike zones, and it's a terminology that kind of come back from the bass fishing world, and now it's moved more into live scope crappie fishing in my mind, because I see strike zones expand and shrink down in different times of the year. Like you said, Grenada, I've seen videos of guys going out there and casting these fish, see them 6 feet away, and they'll come up and smash them.
Yeah.
Very rarely for me that strike zone's that big and expensive. But that presentation coming down to a fish is so key, and from the jig sizes. If the fish are really lethargic and want a small strike zone, I like using lighter size jig heads. That way it stays in that strike zone longer. And a 1/16 and a 32 is pretty standard for me, because most of the time the fish that I'm targeting are suspended up from about 9 to about 12, 13, somewhere in there. But the strike zones have been so small here lately, and that's really what I relied on. That way, once I cast it, it stays in it a little bit longer, that strike zone.
Yeah.
And if you never heard of the terminology strike zone, it's the distance away from that fish's mouth, eyes, to wherever the bait is. Springtime and hopefully the fall, I know that strike zone is typically larger, and you can get out there and you can pull that bait by them faster.
Right.
But talk about when you cast it out, that jig hits the water, how are you holding the pole? I mean, it sounds basic, but it can be such a key into that.
What I like to do is I always like to throw past the fish.
Right. Number one.
And then what I do is, like what I tell my clients and stuff, is I want them to walk that jig to the fish. And it's kind of a timing thing, and it's nothing that time on the water and just repetitiveness. You get better and better with it. But I like them to walk that jig to the fish and get it above them, and then kind of let it fall where it's going to fall kind of straight down to them.
Yeah.
And then when it, right before it gets to them, stop it and kind of hold it there, and then watch what the fish does. If the fish reacts, if he turns up,
oh, he's coming.
You got it, and then as soon as he turns up, I tell him to start reeling.
Yeah.
Take it away. And, and never stop reeling until you feel the rod load up, then set the hook, and you got them. That's my preferred way of doing it. Sometimes, like you said, when the strike zone's bigger and they're aggressive, you can flat roll it across the top of them, and they're coming to get it.
Yeah. But I think, and I've said it a million times probably now, I guess on the podcast and different videos, is paying attention to these details of what these fish are wanting. Some days they want it scalding by them. They want it that 3 or 4 feet above them. And just like our preferences and poles here are a little bit different, and they're similar in some ways. And I didn't ask each one of you this question either, but it's noticing how they're reacting to the bait.
Mm-hmm.
If you toss back across the fish and you're just slowly reeling across them and you get no reaction, at that point you've done something wrong.
Right.
Sometimes, unless she's asleep. And there's plenty of times in Grenada that I make multiple pitches on a fish and I get dang close to her. And with a crappie, if she sees it, she's going to give you some kind of detail that she's going, what I call shake. She's going to shake a little bit.
Shimmer.
All right, if that does not happen and I've come within just inches from her, then she's asleep. And so there's been times where I've had to pitch that jig and actually rub her side, and then she'll make a quick 180 and look for it. She's frantically looking for it, and then she books it to me. Right. I've had that happen.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what this is the deal. When talking about on your presentation, when you make a pitch past a fish, and I have clients do this all the time, it drives me crazy. Make a pitch past, you see the fish, you got her. She's at 35, 40 foot. Make the cast past her, bring the jig by her. If she shakes and starts following you, you do not break stride. You do not break you got to keep your cadence right dead on. Yeah. Do not stop it. And for God's sakes, do not sit there and shake that pole like it's a shaky head worm, because she will lose interest with you, and she will turn and leave. You keep a steady retrieve. And the one way you can tell is a guarantee that she's going to smoke it is if you'll pay attention. If she's straight behind that jig and following you, there's a 50-50 shot she's going to eat it. Now, she might hit it out there at 10 foot. She might hit it right there at the prop of that trolling motor. But if that fish dips down, I call sharking it. Looks like a great white. If she'll go to the bottom and then she comes straight up and that tail's kicking like a happy dog, and that tail is just a waggling, you might have to get it to the prop of that trolling motor and just hold your rod and hold your breath and hold it, and she'll sit there with that tail kicking and looking at it. It might take up to 30 seconds, and then she's going to shoot up there and take the rod. Mm-hmm. It's just crazy how they do, but you can tell by their body mannerism what's going on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's times that I know a fish, if it follows it, more than likely, and it turns around at that last minute, I'll just leave it alone at that point. Come back, maybe, you'll get lucky and find her again or him.
That's right.
But if it loses that interest, it's hard to get that interest strike back up for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For me, anyway. I mean.
Yeah, she's just not hot. You got to get those hot bites, and then it. But yes, their body mannerism, you can break it down to, what you need to be doing.
What about baits? What are some of the baits that you like to cast with as far as that goes?
Oh, Lord, I've got a plethora of them all. Sometimes it's a hair, like at Grenada. I have my own personal hand ties that I do, that I've got this certain color, that jig that's just what I call Grenada magic, and it's just insane. But, as far as here at home on my plastics, I'm fishing for blackfish here at home. Right. The only time these fish are going to roam here at home is pretty much on their pre-spawn deal, like around in February, and they're in big schools. I like to throw things like the top hat. Mm-hmm. Top hat, this water's clear. It's not muddy like Grenada.
Nobody's muddy like Grenada.
No, it's really not. Not unless you just get a torrential downpour, but it's primarily clear. So I like throwing things like sparkle, blue pearl, Patriot, mayfly. Those are my baits that I like to throw, and I switch that up. It might be a 16th that day, and tomorrow it might be an 8th. It just depends on their depth and what the reaction is and how they want it. They want me to burn that bait. They want it to just kind of flutter right over them and so forth.
Right. I mean, I see a lot of people whenever they cast out, they want to drop their pole tip down And for me, I like a pole tip up in the air.
Always.
You know, like at a 45, I'm going to say, I didn't get a angle out and see it, but it's pretty much a 45-degree angle. And that way you can, like Tim said, you can make that jig manipulate it better.
Yeah.
And when I say twitch it to people, I think it comes back into the bass fishing guys that I get in the boat. They want to twitch it like they would a shaky head or a jerk bait
or something. Yeah.
And what I mean by tickling it, I mean almost like a vibration.
Right.
Like it's just a vibration, like a little twerk, twerking it. And I know Chad Rogers, a buddy of ours, he says that all the time on me on live, twerking the baits. But you know, you just want to tickle it, just make it do a little bit of action, and once that fish has fluttered and noticed that bait, you'll see a motion on your screen, and that fish has recognized, hey, there's some kind of prey in my area, in my strike zone. I see it, and at that point, they're going to make a decision to come after it and eat it. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people do is either they speed it up too fast, but I want to keep that same speed that they've been going through
cadence.
and I never want them to stop it.
That's right. Do not. If you stop it, it's over. It's reel it up. Hell, let's go on to the next one, because it's just not going to work. And I'll tell you something else that you know, if you give it up to a customer and let them try it 100%. The most important thing when casting to these open water fish and doing that and following is boat control.
Yeah.
And if you do not keep I see 90% of them, they want to, I get the fishing target, they got it, they got their foot on the trolling motor, and for some reason they want to take that foot off that trolling motor. When you make that cast, you've constantly got to be following that fish and that jig with that trolling motor, and that means do not take, I don't mean push the button and go, just keep toggling that trolling motor, because it's coming to you. That you only got an 8-degree cone. You've got to keep them in that cone, you know, to watch this. And but yeah, boat control there it plays a big role in that type of fishing.
You know, the same thing going along that line is I always try to face into the wind, and I tell people this all the time, especially casting. I want to, once I lock on to a fish, I'm pretty much locked on to that fish, and like whether it's moving it back and forth a little bit or what have you, but I want to bring it back across that fish, steady rhythm. And the stopping part of it is, I always tell them when they do that, because their natural instinct is, I want that fish to bite, so I'm going to make it easy for them. That's what their brain and my brain thought is, make it easy for that fish. Well, it's not natural for that to happen. And I use the analogy is, you know, if you've got a lion chasing after you, the last thing you would ever do is stop and let it eat you.
Exactly.
At least I couldn't do it. I would at least keep my, like they say with a bear, you know, keep moving away or what have you. But never stop. It's just not natural.
And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is when that fish gets committed and it's coming to the bait and they're reeling, and as soon as that fish gets up to the bait on the screen, they want to stop.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not natural.
No.
I think of natural. What is the behavior of these fish and what triggers them and what doesn't all the time? But stopping the bait is just not natural for a prey for that to happen. You see these leopards chasing after these gazelles on the Discovery Channel. You don't see a gazelle stop. Those jokers are running for their lives. And the same thing when it comes to bait fishing. But I want to talk about one moment whenever you're looking for fish. And I kind of covered on a video that was released today. But I can feel like I can spot a fish at about 100 feet out, whether it's a 32 transducer, and I'm talking all Garmin here, or a 34, is number one, if it's flashing. If I see bait fish or anything else flashing on my screen, at that point, I disqualified as a crappie. Now, am I going to say that's never going to be a crappie? There's nothing never happening in fishing. There's always going to be variables that can throw in the mix. But whenever I'm scanning out and I'm looking for an open water fish, I'm looking for a solid beam, a solid light on my screen, and then I kind of want to stair step my step, and that's my mindset. I want to slowly stair step until I can get into my target range. My target range is 40 feet. Once I hit 40 feet, I'm not going to, and I'm talking open water casting, I'm not going to bring it in any closer on the screen as far as the screen itself. But I want to keep that fish between 20 and 35 feet is really in my comfortable range of casting to these open water fish. I feel like if I get closer than 20, especially the last 3 weeks on Barnett, these fish are spooky. I mean, they sense these boats coming to them, whether it's a slap on the water,
the shadow,
who knows? Trolling motors. If it's because we haven't had a lot of wind and it's really quiet out there, so we got to be really quiet in the boat even. But I want to keep that fish between 20 and 35 on my screen. And once I spot it, if they cast and that fish is there at that second, and all of a sudden he turns to the left and moving, I'm going to keep my trolling motor on that fish and locked into that fish and trying to keep him in that 20 to 35 foot range. A lot of times, just like Tim said, I don't want, if that fish is sitting at 20 feet, I don't want that person, or I wouldn't even want to cast to 40 feet. If he's at 20, I want to cast about 23 to 26. I want to cast just a couple feet past him, not that 20 feet past him. I want to cast fairly close. That way, time that bait gets down, if it moves 3 foot to the left, well, time you get it 20 foot back towards that fish and it drops that 12 foot down, you're off target. You might as well just reel it in.
It is.
And I tell people all the time, the difference between catching and fishing is being in that beam.
Yes.
You're fishing once you get out off that target of that fish. You can reel it in as slow as you want or as fast at that point. You're fishing. But to catch fish, you're going to have to stay in that beam, and you're going to have to try to be accurate on your pitches and your casts and what have you.
And there's times where you have to, on a low light day, and you know as well as I do, if the sun's shining bright, they seem to want to stop and just suspend there, which it makes it an easy target. If you get an overcast day, a low light day, these fish start like to move around and feed. So it's kind of like you got to lead them. You got to learn to lead them a little bit, you know, and if they're spooky, a cast and the slap, I've seen where the slap of that jig hit that water, they run straight down the bottom. So I like to take and pitch. I like to just roll it and just kind of like flipping grass for bass. I like to pitch. I like to pitch out there and just let that jig not make the big enough splash so it doesn't spook. Because I have seen them go straight to the mud. You know, and that's aggravating.
It's kind of a soft landing.
Well, it's even like casting. I mean, if you get out there and you slam that joker down, and I even noticed, you know, if you pitch way up in the air and it seems to really dive back down to that water and makes that big
explosive splash, so to say,
that'll spook them just as well. So I try to lay it in there, I guess is a good terminology. But, you know, open water fish is extremely fun technique to get interested in. You get to experiment a lot with bait sizes, profiles, because everything matters when it comes to crappie fishing. We know from the back days of spider rigging that everything that you do changes an outcome on the fish's reaction. Some days you can't do no wrong, and then some days you can't necessarily do everything right either.
That's exactly right.
But you know, the baits that I use a lot of time in the summertime are small baits, and then when I go into the fall, I like bigger size profile baits. Another question, and I think Jeff kind of touched on some of his colors there, but I'm going to ask Mr. Tim here, throw out your, and I know you fish more dingy water than you know the average, but say 5 of your top favorite colors.
For casting, and this is going to sound crazy where I fish, but my number one color is going to be monkey milk.
Monkey milk.
Oh, yeah.
In that muddy water, you would think that would be the absolute worst bait that there is, but what I found, it's probably the best. You know, any color combination with monkey milk in it is always going to be in my top. Then, of course, orange and chartreuse, and that's got to be in there. And, of course, you know, Grenada Gold.
No, Grenada
Gold. I mean, it's a tried and true. I mean, it still catches fish day in and day out. I like the Crappie Magnet. It's one of my preferred casting baits. It just flat out catches fish.
Got 2 more, Tim.
2 more. I'm going to say a white and yellow is one of my really favorite colors.
Real good for me this year.
And then like a seagrass or that type of color in the summertime, I really like it. You know, purple chartreuse.
You know, that's the thing, and you hit on that subject line. You would think muddy water, you got to have really dark and really bright, and that's what we normally use.
We did it for years.
Yeah,
that's what we thought. I didn't own anything monkey milk until I got a Garmin.
Right.
No, I mean there was none ever in my boat, and like I said, until the forward-facing sonar came out, started trying it, and then man, these fish were smoking it, and you're like, wow.
Mm-hmm. You know, I had an example the other day. It was last week. We had a cool front. I can't say in September in Mississippi we have cold fronts, but I can say we had a cool front moved in. That morning, we cast an open water fish, and I use the terminology wolf packs, so these little packs, the little schools of fish a lot. But I noticed that we had some cloud cover, and all morning long they wanted a white chartreuse. I mean, smoking monkey milk, white chartreuse or monkey milk, those really natural tones, light colors. And that cool front moved in, and it got dark outside. And, well, of course, we already had a great day going, so we didn't change colors. You know, who changes color when they have a good bite? Well, the bite slowed down, and I was like, what is going on here? What happened? And, well, of course, it got dark with a whole set of front moving in on top of us. And I told the client, Tony Van Norm is his name. He's fished with me for years. So here's your little shout out there, Tony. But I changed colors. I changed to a bluegill fire, which is a dark body with a hot pink tail, which is totally opposite of what I've used all morning and used all week. But I put on that darker color bait, and I said, man, let's try it. Conditions, the light levels have changed. And first cast I made to it, the fish recognized it, spotted it away, come up, and then held it. And for the last 15, 20 minutes, the fish were in order. Mm-hmm. So I think we kind of got away with it the first couple of years when it came to LiveScope fishing. That color didn't matter. Color necessarily doesn't matter when you can place a jig body right into its mouth. But casting, we need reaction.
You do.
We need them to say, all right, that's a prey fish, we're going to eat it.
Yeah.
So that particular day, what I want to hit on is you need to change colors a lot of days.
Most certainly.
You can't just live and die by one color. And just like Tim's, I knew everybody's would be different, just like the casting poles and such. But changing up these baits as these fish and conditions change can be huge in the same day within just a little while, just because light conditions change.
Right, that's right. And you with that, you got it's more to me, I think, for a profile. So in the darker conditions, your darker colors, just like bass fishing, is just going to put off a better profile.
Yeah.
So. And that helps them home in on it a little bit.
It was a total, and this client of mine that's fished with me for years now, he's like, man, I would have never believed that made such a difference. And I was like,
makes a huge difference.
It was all the difference in the world from those fish pretty much knocking on them and coming across with them, trying to get their attention, and then they're not even giving it any attention. And as soon as I changed colors and put on the darker profile, it was like a light switch. They went back to feeding it, and we went back to catching fish.
Well, it's just like we've said for years and years, it's the small, minute details that you've got to pay attention to. And it's going to make, success and failure.
That's right.
What about, and I went through my preference as far as casting range when you're looking at live sonar. What do you guys like to really pitch at? And I know you're spidering, so it might be different.
I run my unit on 60 feet, and that's where I never change it. I leave it on 60.
Uh-huh.
And 40 to 20 is my range.
Yeah.
I feel very confident if that fish is, if he's sitting where he needs to be sitting in the water column at 40 to 20 feet, I'm going to catch him for the most part.
I could normally, if I'm in an area that's got fish in it, and here's what happened. I have to put a pattern together. You got to have a pattern. You can't just go fishing. So you figure these fish out. You figure it out with something like the hummingbird side image. And then anyway, what I'll do is I'll put my hummingbird that I have up front. I have that Lake Master's chip in it. And when I figure these fish out, they're in anywhere from 12 to 15 foot. And that's the green zone I've got. I do my adjustments, and then far as the Garmin goes, when I'm in the area, I know there's fish there that I'm just going to be casting to them. Normally, mine's out about 35 foot. But here's something I do not change. And here's the reason why. I don't care if I'm in 12 foot of water, my depth range on my Garmin is stuck on 20 feet. Yeah. I do not care if I'm in 10 foot, it's stuck on 20 feet. And then here's why. Because when you go fluctuating that depth, you're taking these images and you're stretching them out. I can pretty much tell you at 20 feet what this fish just about weighs, and I don't want to throw on her in a tournament situation, but you need to be checking this one out here.
Right.
And now you get in deep water, it might change. You might have to bump down if you're fishing standing timber. But now, as far as open water fish, if you're in 28 foot of water and you know these fish are anywhere from 12 to 8 foot to 12 foot, then I don't care. My depth range is staying at 20 foot because I see the jig better and I can determine how big that fish is.
And the fish size never changes. So you know what you're looking at all time. When you start adjusting that bottom depth,
it stretches.
It does. And you might see man, that's a big fish or that's a small fish, and you catch it and you're like, wow.
Exactly.
So you're exactly. I'm the same way. I leave my bottom depth alone.
Once you kind of locate these fish, at least for my bodies of water, probably Tim's as well. Normally, I don't fish any deeper than 20. Very rarely, I did some last January when those fish got in that 20 to 26 foot, and they would lay on the bottom. But if I'm casting for fish, I'm always going to look for the highest water column fish there is. This seems to be the most active fish. They're out hunting. If they're laying on the bottom, typically, especially when you got a bunch of suspended fish, those ones laying on the bottom are pretty full.
I'm not even fooling with him.
Yeah, I'm not going to fool with him. I'm going to keep casting for another one. But, this is definitely a technique. If you haven't done yet and you got LiveScope on your boat, I would definitely advise do it. Another thing that will help you out a lot is a good trolling motor. I don't think I talk enough about trolling motors. And if you're getting into this crappie fishing LiveScope game, you've got, your LiveScope bought and it's installed. Get you a good trolling motor. And that could be, I'm using a Garmin Force. I know Ultrex is very good trolling motors too, but get you a foot pedal trolling motor that you can feather the head of the trolling motor back and forth and keep on track of these fish. Good trolling motor when it comes to crappie fishing with LiveScope is a very big key to success.
That's right.
No doubt. And another thing, when you're chasing open water fish or casting open water fish, for you new guys that's just fixing to get into this or thinking about it, put that transducer on your trolling motor. Do not put it on a pole.
You can't do it on that pole.
No.
There's no way.
The best time, and the only situation I would say that, sitting on a pole might be great if you fished Highlands and you were anchored up, stationary, and you didn't move a lot. But day in and day out, if you're wanting to get into LiveScope crappie fishing, get you a good trolling motor, put it on the shaft of the trolling motor. Nothing against any pole company out there as far as mounting those go.
Oh, it has its place.
It has its place, but especially suspended crappie, you can't hardly do it on a pole.
No, you can't.
You need it on the trolling motor shaft.
It's too many moving parts.
It's too many moving things. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's hard enough when you got a good trolling motor and you're trying to stay on that target and cast to them, or using a single pole and staying on them. But just take my word for it when it comes to this matter. If you're looking to catch suspended crappie day in and day out, having that transducer mounted on your shaft of your trolling motor is huge.
Mm-hmm. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
There is no other way.
It's just too hard otherwise.
Yeah.
It's hard enough.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And another thing when it comes to this technique is keep in mind that every day is going to be different and it's going to take practice. You're going to want to take it and throw these live sonar and any of this live stuff, and most guys are using Garmin. Throw them you're going to want to throw everything on the lake. You're going to say, man, forget this. This is for the birds.
It is. This is impossible.
Right.
I can't do this. But it's that boat control again. You got to get that down. If you can't get that down, then go on home. Because, that's what's most important about the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I'd like to touch on, we hadn't really, we talked about rods and stuff, but, casting to these open water fish, a good reel is paramount. I had to learn that the hard way. I'm an old spider rigger, and I bought $15 reels to hold line with, and that's all I've ever used.
That's what they were.
And then once we started this, I just took some of those reels off, and I'm like, man, this isn't cutting it.
No,
but then I don't want to spend $150 on a reel, but I did. And then it's daylight and dark.
It is. And, those cheaper ones that got that, sometimes after a while they'll get that hard spot in
Exactly.
it. You've just boogered up the whole thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, it's good to get that. Like that Shimano Sahara is a good one.
Yeah.
Or, there's a lot of them on the market that are great.
That's
They're
right.
smooth with a smooth drag on them.
But I would definitely recommend, if you're going to cast these fish, get you a good reel.
Yeah.
What about line? I know I'm use 6-pound test, mono. That's what I'm comfortable with. I know that rate fall and everything else.
Right.
I like a mono that way. It kind of stretches a little bit of give.
Yeah.
What about line with you guys?
I use casting. I use 10-pound sniping braid. I've tried all the braid, and that sniping braid casting is like it's a micro braid, and to me it just casts so smooth. It works really, really well. I like the fall rate of it. I'm just a fan of it, and that's the only time I use braid in anything is when I'm casting. I use a 10-pound braid.
I've got about 10 reels in my boat for me and my clients, and every one of them has got 6-pound high-vis K9 fluoro on it, and that's whether I'm fishing here at home. Even if I go to Grenada, I know it's crazy, but I'm throwing that 6-pound high-vis. The one thing I will do here at home with the water being as clear and as finicky as these blackfish can get, I'll take that. I don't want to totally put clear line on my reels because there's times I'm a line watcher, and I need to see that bite. And I did a video on TikTok not long ago about this, and I'm a big offshore fisherman too, so I take things from out there and bring them home. And I'll take about 18 inches of the K9 clear fluorocarbon, and I'll do a blood knot, and it's a real aerodynamic inline knot that if you want to, it will go through the guides very easy without hanging up. Me personally, with 18 inches, though, you're not going to make it to the guide.
Right.
So I'll take
Hopefully
that. Yeah, that's like a child, But anyway, I'll have that 18 to 24 inches, and I'll have it out, and then I'll tie my jig on it because, it's people will argue with it. Does the line matter or not? I don't care if it matters to them or not. It matters to me.
That's right. That's all that matters.
And then if I got confident, if I have to get over some fish in 25, 30 foot, and there's, like yesterday, 300 bunched up on a piece of standing timber, and I have to vertically drip, with that 8-footer and just get it down there and just hold it still and hold my breath and read an article before she'll hit it, it matters to me.
That's right.
But it does work. It works for me. So.
Well, guys, I definitely appreciate your time for coming on.
You too, buddy.
If you're out here watching the show, make sure you hit subscribe, follow. I'm almost at 10,000, or we're almost at 10,000 followers on YouTube, so I appreciate everybody clicking on that button and making it happen for us. We've got a ton of different podcasts and videos back in our library that you can go back and rewatch if you want to get familiar with the subject lines. So make sure you look back some of our older stuff. There's some golden stuff that's been recorded on the past that definitely, if you're just a new time listener, watcher, go back and really look at that stuff too. And I think that can help you out. But you got Brad Chappell here.
Tim Howell.
And Jeff Jowers.
We'll see you next time. Holla.
See you.
About a mile from the big muddy river, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away.